Here's a third basic to the blessings of God. They offered themselves totally. They offered themselves totally. Look at chapter 22. Boy, this is a powerful passage. I wish I had time to read the whole of chapter 22. Here's what God tells us in chapter 22. After these things, God tested Abraham and said to him, Abraham. And he said, by the way, here's that continual conversation. By the way, everybody look at me. When God speaks to you, answer him. Just answer him. Samuel did. Just this, after these things, God tested Abraham and said to him, Abraham. Oh, by the way, if you remember from last week, God actually came down into the garden and said to Adam, Adam, where are you? By the way, anyone here think that perhaps God didn't know where he was? Anyone here like to rise up and say God doesn't know where you are? I'll tell you what, let me get real southern just for a minute. Will you all forgive me? You think God doesn't know where you're at? Doesn't sound the same when I say it, but you know what I'm talking about. There you is. See, folks, I can do it if I want to. It just doesn't come out right, and I feel very awful, like I'm betraying the British Empire or something. Last thing I need is the Queen on my case right now. Look here, Abraham. And Abraham said, here I am. By the way, do you think God didn't know where Abraham was? Like, hello, Abraham. Whoa, hey, angels, come over here. I've lost Abraham. Why do you all walk around like you think God lost you? You really think God didn't watch what you did last night? So God tested Abram, said to him, Abraham, he said, here I am. And he said, take your son, your only son Isaac, whom you love, and go to the land of Moriah and offer him there as a burnt offering on one of the mountains, which I shall show you. Folks, here's the bottom line. Notwithstanding this remarkable story, this picture of the sacrifice of the Lord Jesus Christ, they offered themselves totally. Isaac was everything to Abraham. So why are you and I holding back? Why are we holding on to? What have you got in your hand? Do you know that when I lived in New Orleans, there was a very famous man there. Very famous man. Very famous. Founded restaurants. He had the biggest Christmas light show you've ever seen. This man was multi-millionaire, if not a billionaire. Flamboyant, playboy, everybody knew him. And he went to Europe on a trip in his mid-50s and he died in Europe. And they flew him back. I'll never forget. Steve, maybe you were living in New Orleans with me at that time. They flew him back. I'll never forget the entourage, the pomp, the ceremony. Because this wealthy, famous playboy man had died. Everybody talked about it. It was everywhere. Do you know what his will said? when they buried this man, they buried him in a grave big enough to accommodate a whole lot of his boats, motor cars, motorbikes. That was what he wanted. He wanted to be buried with as many of his worldly possessions as he could. And some of you are headed to the grave with your worldly possessions all over you, and you're wondering why God is not blessing you. You can get buried in your Rolls Royce and have nothing. These people were blessed according to our understanding of God's story because they offered themselves totally. But it went further than that. Number 4, they understood clearly. They understood clearly. Just quickly go over to chapter 35. Chapter 35, all the way to chapter 35. Look at verse 1. They understood clearly. Verse 1, God said to Jacob, arise, go up to Bethel and dwell there. Make an altar there to God, who appeared to you when you fled from your brother Esau. These people were blessed because they understood absolutely and abundantly clearly that nothing short of an altar of worship and offering and praise before God will suffice in God's economy. Stop messing around with God. They understood that.